Okay, welcome to the Kickass Midlife Method podcast. I'm Rachel, your host, and I'm joined by some women within the Kickass Midlife Method community. And we're talking about the number 1 training principle that midlife women need to know. And it really helps to unlock your key to strength, shape, and longevity. And it's probably the number 1 thing that most women don't do. So we're often, if you're someone who typically goes out or has done in the past trying to smash your workouts and never sees any change, this will be why. So, what we're going to discuss is what progressive overload is and why it's absolutely essential in midlife. 7 ways to apply it. Most people think there's one, but there's different methods to apply it. How your goals influence which method you choose. And then we're going to have a little go, each of us in the meeting who are live, about how you would apply it to your own training. Just an example. I'm not going to ask you to go away and do it straight away, but just to give you, just so that I know that you understand by the end of this what I actually mean by it. So if any of you, give me a 2 in the chat, have any of you in the past or been training for quite a long time and not noticed any much change in your strength or shape? Or number 3, if you have, but maybe some of you, number 3, who've been in the program quite a while, hopefully you have. But in the past, if you've done, yeah, if you've done lots and just thought, God, I can't see any difference, this will be why. Yeah, so quite a lot of you, which is what I would expect. So why progressive overload is essential. Progressive overload, I should just explain, it basically means anything that's challenging the muscle fibers, neuromuscular, anything like that. So anything that challenges it. So it's essential in midlife because it builds strength and muscle, which in and of itself protects bone density. So your muscles attached to the bone. So therefore, the stronger they are, they're pulling on the bone. So therefore, that's what's really helping protect the bone density as well. Boosts metabolism. So even when you're sitting around doing nothing, if you weren't to do anything else, the more muscle you have, the more calories you're going to be burning, even when you're just sitting around, the more energy. It obviously supports joint health and stability, fights age-related muscle loss, sarcopenia. So as you can see from this illustration, which I'll come to, and it really keeps it stimulating, mentally engaging. So if, in the past, you've probably just gone to classes because it makes you do it and it makes you more enjoyable. But actually, if you start tuning into progressive overload, that makes it quite enjoyable because you're suddenly training with a bit more purpose and ownership on what you're doing. And it's really important to remember that in midlife, we're losing muscle. It accelerates even more post-menopause. So it's not like an optional thing. Any of you've got aging parents and you see now how like they might have like very skinny legs and arms and find it difficult to kind of walk and move around, sarcopenia. So as you can see in this illustration on the left, you can see the muscle in red, what that looks like as a 35-year-old. And these illustrations won't necessarily be women. They'll probably, as most studies are done on men, be men. Um, uh, 55, so you can see that muscle diminishing, and then 85. And that all that can be reversed if you keep up progressive overload. So how do you do it? So method 1, which probably give me a 4 in the chat if you know this one, you increase your weight. So 5 if you don't. I think most of us, yeah, would know that one. So I get lots of questions about this in the community, like how much do you increase the weight? So for most of us in here, you'd be thinking about every week adding small increments. And it may be because if you're new to resistance training, then you underestimate how strong you are. So actually, you could try 1 to 2 kilos every set, actually. And the great thing about progressive overload when you're new to resistance training is you see massive leaps in your strength in terms of what you can lift because it's new and you can see that increase quite a lot at the beginning. As you get stronger, those incremental gains are much smaller. It's hard to increase from a like 100 kilo deadlift up from there. So it becomes a little bit harder. Obviously, base rate is you maintain good form. As soon as you think, oh my God, my form's going, you stay where you are. So, gradual jumps. Yeah, as you can say, 40 kilos for 8 reps, try 42.5 kilos the next week. So always give that a go in your workouts. At any point, if you're in the program, you're not sure about your form, video and send it to me. If you're in the group program, put it in the group. If you're a VIP client, message me privately or whatever. Everybody benefits from looking at someone's technique. We all can improve our technique, including me. So number 2 is increase the reps. So for many of you, if you're working out from home and you've got limited weights, then this is one way you can do it. You can keep the weight the same if you've got no more weights to go up to and increase the reps that you're doing. So maybe 12 to 15. Yeah, 12 to 15 and see how that goes. And obviously, if you've got 3 sets and you think, right, I'm going to do the first set at 15, second set you still hit 15, third set you maybe only hit 12, then that's a way of doing it. So rep range is also a way to do it. Then 3 is increase the sets. So and add an extra set to increase your total volume. So if you're a very busy woman, then you can be thinking, well, if I increase the sets, I've got to increase the time that I've got to spend in the gym. What I would say to that and how I always try to compile everyone's programs is I often do supersets so that you're not resting. Because what you'll see a lot, especially if you're in the gym, you're probably all used to just seeing people staring off into the distance, or you feel like they're looking at you because they're just sitting there doing nothing. It's because they're resting between the sets because you can't go on and lift straight away. So nobody's looking at you, nobody's being like staring you out. It's literally like they're just waiting until their muscles are recovered. But I try to decrease that wait time when you're just sitting around doing nothing and give you an opposing muscle to work, or same muscle but a slightly different from a slightly different angle, so you increase your effectiveness, the results in a shorter space of time. Another thing to do that I do with midlife women, which I'll be introducing a little bit more of, is mobility stuff in between sets as well. So that's what you can do rather than just sitting there thinking, oh, I've got to rest. But when you start increasing the sets, then actually you do want to take that rest. So this, interesting, starts working into hypertrophy, the growth of the muscle, not just the strength of the muscle. So there's 2 different things. What most of us are working on at the moment is strength, like how much can you, how much force can you create to push a weight? Once you have, which creates body composition changes, creates muscle, but once you get to a certain level, then we start working into hypertrophy, which is the growth of the muscle. So it's slightly different things, and increasing the sets gets into that stage. And then decreasing rest time. So actually, for lots of you, you'll notice you don't have any rest time because I'm moving you from one muscle group to another, so you're not wasting time. As you start lifting heavier, then the next thing you can do is decrease the rest time. So greater for fat loss phases, but you want to be really careful that you're not cutting rest so much that your form begins to suffer, that becomes a problem. So for an example, and it's really important that if you do have rest times in your programs, that you do try and stick to them because there's a point to them. You don't want to recover so much, 4 minutes between sets. And I'm terrible for this, I confess. I sometimes will be busy, like, doing work bits in between a set, and then I'll think, oh my God, that's 4.5 minutes. So yeah, be really, really careful. I'll own up to that one. Be really careful that you try to stick to the rest time. Otherwise, you're affecting the effectiveness of that workout. And then plyometric training, so jump training. So an example of plyometric training, squat jumps instead of squats, jumping lunges instead of lunges, skipping, that kind of thing. Even running is a plyometric force, hopping, all of those are plyometrics. So obviously they add power. They recruit. We have fast twitch and slow twitch fibers. I won't go too much into it. I don't want to confuse you all. But a fast twitch are really good for longevity, helping your body to feel younger. Again, this is something that requires a greater degree of fitness and strength first. You need to have your stability there first before you go into any explosive stuff. Yeah, and for many of you who are constantly saying to me, I can't do push-ups, your next level up from a full push-up is a clapping push-up. And then you change the tempo. Now, some of you in the program will have started to get this, where I'm telling you to slow down the eccentric. So, from a bicep curl, you're going down, you're slowing the lowering phase and increasing the. So, you're doing a 3 second count down, 1 second count up, and that can create more muscle tension and work you a bit harder. So again, a real example, if you're working out from home, you don't have access to a lot more weights, you've run out of your weights, then think about that tempo, doing that. In fact, it might be worth some of you just trying that this week if you've got a phase and giving that a go and seeing how that feels. And then this is changing the plane of movement as well. So we all, when I'm talking about plane of movement, we all move in a certain way. Like we walk in a certain way, we drive in a certain way. Yeah, we sit in a certain way. So I've done this a lot with women I've coached in person in the past, where you're just getting someone to move sideways makes it really, really difficult because we're just not used to that. So that's another neuromuscular way of progressively overloading the muscle in a different way. Again, I get onto that kind of after hypertrophy level or within hypertrophy level. So you're creating kind of more mobility in some ways along with that hypertrophy and strength. So an example is you would do a sideways lunge, not a forward lunge and not a backward lunge. Those kind of things can just change the plane of movement and make it seem a little bit more difficult. Again, we're just challenging the muscle, neuromuscular, in a different way. And that's progressive overload as well. So loads and loads of different ways to progressively overload. Now, this is an interesting bit of research. So they researched both perimenopausal women and women postmenopause, followed exactly the same protocols. Strength gains possible at any stage, but muscle growth, interestingly, hypertrophy, showed in perimenopausal women, but not postmenopausal women. So again, with all studies to do with women on health and sport and fitness, there aren't that many of them. So how much of this is supported by other research, who knows? But what it is suggesting is that you'd need, for postmenopause, you'd need more volume to increase to get that hypertrophy compared to if you're in perimenopause. So for anybody thinking, I might miss my third workout of the week, you don't want to, because those 3 workouts are the prime number of sets you'd need as a postmenopausal woman to get those hypertrophy effects. And again, even moderate overload boosts bone density, insulin sensitivity, and energy. So that's a good thing. So in general, strength, you increase your weight and frequency. For muscle growth, you're focusing on increasing your sets, the volume, tempo, or plane of movement. But of course, you don't have to worry about that, because if you're on the program, I set all that kind of thing for you. But I think it's really important to understand how it works and why it's so important, why I keep going on about progressive overload, why suddenly you're probably hearing it all over social media, whereas before, in the past, you might have just heard, do a bit of body pump, or do a bit of this, or in magazines it was like lift up a bag of flour or a bottle of water, and that would somehow increase your strength. Obviously, totally wrong. So, what I'd like you to do, you can either do it. I want you to think about one exercise. So, if you've got your apps in front of you with your programs, I want you to look at your program, choose one exercise, and either write or come on and tell me how you would progressively overload it using one of those seven methods. So, just one exercise. Who's gonna give me an example? And I've given quite a few examples kind of in there as I've talked through it. Yeah, yeah. Goblet squat increase from 10.5 to 11.5 kilos, you mean, not 11 and a half reps. Stay down there at the bottom. That would be another way. Yeah, exactly. So that's increasing your weight. So another example would be goblet squat. You decrease in 3 seconds your tempo. So you go down in three, you fire up in 1 second. So that would be another example because your muscles are having to hold that weight kind of for longer in control. It's almost like adding 2 kilos onto the weight without adding 2 kilos onto the weight, as an example. Lateral, yeah, lateral arm raise, yeah, change the tempo. In fact, that's a really good one on the lateral arm raise because the lateral arm raises are really tough. That muscle there is really tough, and most of us are probably quite weak there. So, to increase sometimes your weight on the lateral arm raise to begin with is quite hard. So, quite a way, good, it's a really good example of how you can do it without having to increase the weight when you like go from literally sometimes it can be 2, 3 kilos, 4 kilos, and you can't quite do the four. But if you slow down the tempo of the three, that's a really good way of doing it. I was in a class here actually, and they didn't have enough weights for me, and that's what she got me to do. They didn't have heavy enough, so they just made me slow down the tempo of that. So that's a good example. Um, Yeah, glute bridge. You could do the other instance actually for you, Kerry, or an example of the progressive overload is you make it harder by lifting one leg and marching them. So you're doing one-legged glute bridges. So that's another example. Yep, barbell deadlift. That's adding weight again. So same as what Philippa said. Any more for any more? So I gave an example. I think some of you've got lunges. You could do lateral lunges. Another example is if you've got a plank, you can move. If you're managing to do a full plank, only if you do the full plank, you can slightly shift your hips side to side like this on different plane of movement. So rather than just holding it, you move your hip to the right and to the left, and then suddenly we're working on a different plane of movement, and that makes it much harder. So that's another example. Um, so yeah, so that's good. So yeah, in summary, same weight, reps, same results. If you keep doing that, so every week that you're doing your program and we work on 6 week phases, that's what you're thinking about. You want to get to that 6 weeks having a marked change from week one, which is why a lot of the workouts repeat for a 6 week phase. It's not an optional thing if you actually want to see results, actually want to improve your longevity. And remember, it's not just aesthetics or just your bone density or just adventure in later life. It is actually improves your health and insulin response, having more muscle. So it's not like an optional thing, it's non-negotiable if you want results. There's 7 ways to do it, so endless ways to progress. Goals, it's really important to have a goal, even if your goal is, I want to increase my muscle mass by 1% in 3 months. is hard as women. So when I'm talking about hypertrophy and growing your muscles, it is really hard. So I don't want any of you to worry that you're going to turn into the Hulk because it is so difficult. As some of you in the program would have seen, you'll see your lean muscle in the app very rarely changes. You have to really work hard at it. So there's absolutely no need to worry that you're going to turn into Hulk Hogan. And apply and maybe have a go applying one change this week unless you've just started. Then yeah, don't do it if you've just started. So yeah, don't maintain, start progressing. So thanks for joining me on this podcast, and I hope this has given you a little bit of insight into why, if you've been training for many years or going to exercise classes, your body pumps and your pelotons or whatever it is, and not seeing any results, this is why. You do have to follow the same workouts for a phase. Because otherwise it's impossible to progressively overload, and then you go from there.